I have one of the most interesting and insightful moral thinkers of the United States on the line with me, Eric Metaxas. Eric Metaxas has written the bestseller, the number one bestseller, which is extraordinary for such a serious book, the biography of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who resisted the Nazis, the Christian pastor. It's now become one of the few things that could be called a modern classic. He also wrote a very important biography of Wilberforce, who was the force behind abolition of slavery. He and I will be together in Chicago Saturday night, and it's a very big deal, a very big event with the head of the Moody Church at the Moody Church in Chicago. The information is up at DennisPrager.com. Eric, it's a pleasure to have you back on the show.
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you. Just gives me, a good feeling to hear your voice. You have the gift of encouragement, Dennis.
I do?
Yes, you do.
Good. I'm going to use it on myself then.
Well, that's always the tough one, right?
Yeah.
You think, I'd like to get a little bit of that, but, you encourage others, you do.
Well, I hope so. It's very kind of you to say. I just got a call right before you came on from a 24-year-old who believes that the United States has, in the totality of the United States history, it has been more a force for evil than for good. And I said he was a perfect product of our educational system, the Howard Zinn view. Do you have thoughts on what is happening in the view of America in this next generation?
Well, there's so much to say you don't know where to begin. Here's where I'll begin. I was just in Greece. I was there for 3 weeks because my dad, who by the grace of God is still alive at age 86, he grew up in a village in Greece, on an island in Greece, and my connection as a son of immigrants to that place is still very strong. My mother grew up in Germany, as I think you know, so I'm the son of immigrants. They met in an English class in New York City in 1956, and the question is, why did they come here? They came in that generation before it was yet chic to think of the United States as a bad place. And when I think of it, my father raised me to be very pro-American, very pro-American. And, it wasn't really very complicated. If you are spoiled and you've lived in America, you've never really seen the rest of the world, you really don't have any idea what we have here. Just being in Greece, which I love, gave me a taste of what we have here. And I think that that's the best thing you can say to people is go travel, because it will give you a perspective that you will never get. It's kind of like the kid who complains about the world, he complains about his parents, and he's still living at home. Go out into the world, and 10 years later you'll have a slightly different perspective. I haven't said this publicly, but I almost died 9 days ago when I was in Greece. I ran in a road race. Some friends of mine know I'm a runner. Never pushed myself that hard. And a bizarre thing happened, and I was taken in an ambulance. And I had the joy, speaking of America, I had the joy of going into a Greek hospital for 2 days. And if you want a perspective, just one, of why America is great, all you have to do is go to a hospital in a country like Greece. It wasn't as bad as some people might think, but it was significantly worse than what I've experienced here. And I got to think about why. And you realize it's for many reasons, but that culture, that way of life, there are things there that they don't have there, I should say, that we have here that we totally take for granted. I mean, one, I would say, which is being corroded already, but this idea that basically the institutions of authority are good, right? I hope we'll talk about this this Saturday night in Chicago at the Moody Church. I want to make sure I get that plug in for my Chicago friends. But to talk about this idea of what happens in a country like Greece where there's profound cynicism about the government, let's say, right? The government changes every 20 years. The left is in for 20 years. They put all their cronies in, and then something happens, and then the right gets in. They had a junta in Greece, and all the cronies, the hard right cronies, are put in. So there's a profound cynicism, and that erodes the ability for people to make sound decisions because they simply don't believe anything. There's deep cynicism in all the things, the organs of government, all the institutions. There's cynicism. So this governs everything. I see that beginning to happen here.
Where is the cynicism from, in your view?
Listen, there's so much here, and you know this, and I hope we'll get to unpack this on Saturday night. But here's the bottom line, and I think your listeners know this as well. The left has taken control of the narrative. Okay, they have wisely, in some case with diabolical wisdom, they have determined that if you sing the songs of the culture, if you tell the stories of the culture, you can get the mind of the culture. It's not so much about legislation and politics. Not that that's not important, and we know that that's very important. Our laws, our legislators, who's the politician, so that's important to be involved in that. But if you think you can win there, it's like trying to win a war with no airplanes in the sky. You can put more and more boots on the ground and you're getting killed because the other guy's got a few planes in the sky. And I think that in terms of the culture, TV, movies, the cultural narrative, we have abdicated that to the left, who have a secular humanist, materialistic, ultimately nihilistic view of humanity and all that kind of stuff. And so what we have to do, again, because we haven't been doing it for at least 40 years, is tell the stories of hope and joy. In my small way, just telling the story of Dietrich Bonhoeffer or the life of William Wilberforce, these incredibly inspiring, great lives. In fact, my publisher would kill me if I didn't plug it. My newest book is called 7 Men, and I tell 7 short biographies of 7 great lives. Now, when you look at those lives, you see that you can't be hopeless. You see that there are people that have fought against the odds, and it makes you want to do that. And any normal person, when they are confronted with that kind of stuff, the response is to do the same thing. But if we're not telling our young people these stories, we are really crushing their souls. Basically, the story of George Washington, that's the
Well, the
first
story of George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and the like is now a story of racists.
Well, that's, of course.
Of sexists.
That's academia.
Yep.
They've taken over, and we need to listen. We can do an end run around it to some extent, Dennis, in the way that we couldn't do 20 or 30 years ago because of talk radio, because of the internet. It's possible to do some kind of an end run around this, and that's a larger conversation.
Yep.
But
All right.
George Washington is the perfect example. I mean, he's portrayed as what? A bad guy, a slave owner. When you hear the story, and I only know it because I've done the research recently, which is why I've made him the #1 guy in the book. I said, this is the greatest hero I've ever encountered. But there are a couple of generations that know nothing about him.
That's right.
And you're going to love America if you love George Washington. But if you told George Washington's a bum, it leads to cynicism.
Eric, I could talk to you for hours, and I intend to do so Saturday night in Chicago. I look forward to seeing you. Thanks a million.
Yeah, this is a great whet your appetite. Thank you, Dennis. Looking forward to it.
Thank you very much. Eric Metaxas, very special man. That should be quite an evening, actually, with Erwin Lutzer, one of the leading Christian pastors in the country and one of the biggest churches in the country. The information is at DennisPrager.com.